there's a secret passageway. Dun dun dun. They get it on in the park. Crawling in his blood, eating his hair and stuff. And then, I was not expecting this. What is up, you guys? Welcome back. Today I'm back with another books and makeup looks video. This is a new series where I do my makeup and chat about a book that I've recently read. I'm going to break down the book for you in depth and give you a really good refresher. So you want to make sure that you've already read the book before watching my video, because this will be filled with a ton of spoilers. So make sure you've already read it because I don't want to ruin it for you. Today we are going to be talking about The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley. I wanted to do a thriller, suspense, murder mystery type of book next because I think that's my personal favorite genre so far. I have read The Guest List by Lucy Foley. I enjoyed the story, but I guessed it really quick, and that wasn't the case with this one. I did really enjoy this story, and I could not guess the ending. So this book took me for a wild ride. This book is about a girl named Jess. She is from the UK, but she's coming to Paris to live with her stepbrother for a little bit, and when she gets there, he's missing. He is not answering her texts, her phone calls, and she is trying to figure out what happened to Ben. Everybody in the apartment has a secret, and everyone also kind of secretly hates Ben, and you're trying to figure out which one of them is responsible for him being missing. And there's a lot of twists and turns, there's a lot of things revealed, and a lot of secrets, and it's really good. It goes a couple different places that I had no idea it was going to go. So this book, in every chapter, is from the perspective of a different person in the book, which I really enjoyed because then you get into the mind of each character. On the screen, when I talk about each character, I have decided to pick out an actor that I think best represents that character in my mind. So they are not making a movie of this that I know of, but that went really well the last time, and it helped you guys stay on track with the story. So I'm going to continue that with this one, even though these are actors that I've decided look like these characters. So I hope that that's helpful. I hope you enjoy this video. Without any further ado, let's get into The Paris Apartment. Okay, so this book takes place in Paris. It starts off with a prologue, and this is from Ben's perspective. So basically, this entire book captures the perspectives of a few different characters, and all of the characters that you're hearing these perspectives from live inside of this apartment. It's basically just a story of where is Ben, who done it, who's guilty. Everybody has different secrets. You kind of have to piece things together. So when we're reading this, we want to really pay attention to all of the different details because they all somehow correlate. So yeah, the story starts off from Ben's perspective. Basically, he is just sitting in his apartment and he's texting his half-sister Jess. We find out eventually that he and his sister share the same mom. Trigger warning, there's going to be a lot of sensitive topics in this video, so if viewing sensitive content isn't for you, I highly recommend not to listen. Just putting that out there. Yeah, basically they share a mom, but they have different dads. When they were younger, Jess basically was banging on the door. Her mom was on the other side of it. I think she was in a bathroom. So Jess picked the lock and saw her mom there. She had taken her life. And so that really badly affected Jess. And then from that, they went on to live with different foster families. Jess kind of got the shit end of the stick, where not that she was in a shitty situation by any means, but Ben got adopted into a family that was very wealthy, and he went to a different part of the UK. They both grew up in the UK, and he went to nicer schools and just everything that goes along with it. And the family said they only wanted one of the kids. They didn't want to keep them together. So they did stay in touch over the years, but they weren't that close. So that's just kind of something that we end up learning throughout the book. There's little bits and pieces there that we learn. The prologue begins. Ben is in his apartment in Paris and he's texting Jess, his half-sister. He had told her previously that she can come stay with him anytime she wants, and in that moment he was regretting it. We find out why as the story goes on. So as he's sitting there texting her, he hears somebody at his door and they have a key. They're just coming into his apartment. So then he gets up, goes to see who is there, and at this moment in time we don't know who it is, but Ben does. Ben knows this person. He's like, hey, what are you doing here? And then in the book it says that Ben sees what this person has in their hands. Dun dun dun. And that's kind of just like how the book ends up moving along. Each chapter is from the perspective of a different person in the apartment building, and at the end of each chapter it ends with like a dun 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 sort of thing. So then we flash to present tense, and Jess is outside of the building. Ben is now not texting her back. She can't reach him, and she's trying to get in the building, but she's locked out. As she's there, like banging on the knocker thing on the gate to get in, there's a woman on the penthouse floor looking down, observing, and she's just kind of like annoyed. Like, who is this person making all this noise? And this person on the penthouse, her name is Sophie, and she's a main character. She is in her 50s. Just picture just like glamorous, rich. She's got a short, dark, blunt bob haircut, decked out in designer, just like I'm better than you vibes. She is just kind of like looking down, judging Jess, like, who are you? Why are you here? And why are you making so much noise? We also learn that from every single character's perspective, everybody hates Ben for some reason. And we don't know why until as the book like progresses and as it goes along, we find out why everyone likes him and then why everybody hates him. And so everybody technically has a motive for whatever happens. And so we just kind of figure that out as we go. So this is the first time we're hearing from Sophie. And then we find out like she doesn't like Ben for some reason. So now we're flashing back to Jess's perspective. She's down there trying to get in the gate, and she gets a text that says, "You stupid little bitch, you think you can get away with what you've done." And you're like, what the fuck is that about? So then she blocks the number, and a man comes up and he goes in the gate. Jess is like, "Hey, I'm looking for my brother Ben. Have you seen him?" And he just kind of snaps at her and is super short with her and annoyed. He's like, "Ben's not here," and then tells her to fuck off. So Jess gets inside. She goes up to his apartment, picks the lock because obviously he's not answering his phone. He's not going to be there. He's not answering the door. So she picks the lock and goes inside, and she just starts to like explore and look around. Then Jess decides to get into bed because she's tired. She's going to fall asleep because it's late. And when she goes to get into bed, she sees some woman's panties. Scandalous. So then she goes to sleep, and she's woken up at 5 a.m. to a ruckus. So she looks outside the window and sees the guy from earlier. We find out his name is Antoine. He's down there with a girl, and they're both just fighting, and Jess starts having flashbacks to like her mom and similar situations where there was like fighting and physical violence and things like that. So Jess rushes down there because she wants to help this woman. We find out her name is Dominique, and she is Antoine's wife. So it looks like Dominique is leaving him. She's got suitcases, and he had like thrown a suitcase at her and her stuff like fell all over. So Jess is there trying to help Dominique like put it all together. She introduces herself to this woman, Dominique. We find out that Dominique might have had a thing for Ben because she talks about like how he was like handsome and all this stuff, and then insinuates that maybe Antoine had something to do with why Ben's missing. So there's little like hints here and there of like who could have been responsible. And then out of nowhere, there's a woman that shows up. She's described as the concierge and an old woman. She doesn't have a name throughout the whole book. So if you hear me say the old woman or the concierge, it's the same person. And this woman just kind of like appears out of nowhere and kind of freaks Jess out. So she appears, freaks Jess out, and then just walks into her cabin. It's like this little cottage cabin on the property, but just kind of like offset since she takes care of the property and stuff. But she's known to just kind of like pop up and show up in places, just kind of give like a spooky vibe. So anyways, since it was like 5 a.m. and she had like got woken up, she decides to go back upstairs and go back to sleep. And then when she wakes up later on in the day, she's just looking around, and she realizes in between a floorboard is this pendant that Ben wore that Jess has the matching one of. This is like lodged in between the floor. I can't say floorboard. Floorboards. It's lodged between the floorboards, and around it is like a bleach stain. Like whatever happened there got cleaned up, like it was scrubbed clean. She's just trying to put the pieces together like, okay, Ben's not responding, and now I see this, but like it's not enough to go to the police. She's thinking about how she hasn't had the best run-ins with the police in the past, and she's also, you kind of learn that she's escaped something. Jess has done something that's technically illegal, so she just doesn't want to go and talk to the police. She feels like they're going to let her down and that she could actually get in trouble for something that she has done. So she's trying not to go to the police until it's like absolutely necessary. And right now she doesn't feel like she has enough information to be like, hey, like my half brother just isn't here. Although to be honest, I understand like not wanting to go to the police, but for me, if someone's not texting me back and I'm supposed to be at your apartment and then you're not there, I'm going to the police. Like, there's no explanation. If we find out later that you just didn't text me back and you were at the grocery store all night long, then that's on you. So now we are hearing from the perspective of somebody named Mimi. Mimi is described as like a 19-year-old girl. She's got short dark hair and she has a roommate named Camille. And Jess comes to the door knocking on it, just being like, hey, have you seen my brother? I'm his sister and he's supposed to be here. I'm supposed to be staying with him. And Mimi immediately is like, I didn't know him, instead of I don't know him. So that kind of like insinuates past tense, that she knows like he is no longer with us or something like that. So red flag. But she continues to say like, oh, sorry, like that was my English. Like she like mixed up the tenses. But then she goes on to say she hasn't seen him in a week. But then her roommate Camille butts in and she's like, that's a lie. I saw you talking to him yesterday on the stairs. And then Mimi slams the door in Jess's face and runs and goes and pukes in the bathroom. So she's upset about something. She's hiding something. Red flags. So then after that, Jess is hungry. There's like no food in the apartment and she doesn't have any money. That's the other thing, is she was really banking on like living with Ben and sort of like an emergency sort of situation. She didn't have much money on her. Even like her phone bill, she only paid enough for like a certain amount of like minutes or something. She's also like hoping to like connect to like his Wi-Fi and use that instead of like her phone data and stuff. So anyway, so she goes to this pastry shop because she doesn't have any food to eat, and she runs into Sophie, and at the time she doesn't realize it's Sophie, but yeah, she bumps into her and Sophie drops this letter that says, all in French, but it says double next time, bitch. Ooh, spicy. And you're like, what is that about? Like, what's going on? Then later on, back at the apartment, Sophie sees Jess just kind of like snooping around the apartment. She's going up all the stairs. She does not like that Jess is snooping around the apartment. Sophie knows that Jess is Ben's sister or half sister or something. She can tell because they look related. And so she's thinking back to when she first met Ben and how Nick had introduced them. So Nick is somebody else that lives in the building. When she first met him, called her madam, and she corrected him because she didn't want to, like, you can kind of tell that she's she's very self-conscious about her appearance. Like, she talks about how she like barely eats because she wants to look a certain way, and she's very adamant that like she just looks very put together all the time, wears these Hermes scarves, and even her dog like matches her and stuff, and they're all just very like, she's very put together. So when they were introduced and Ben called her madam just out of respect, she was offended and told him to just call her Sophie because she didn't want to feel old, and saying madam instead of mademoiselle she was just kind of like, whoa, bitch, I'm young. You know what I mean? But then she also didn't like that he was just calling her Sophie because that was very just casual. So she was just kind of like, shit. Then she starts thinking about how she started getting blackmailed. These letters just started showing up to her apartment saying to put 2,000 euros in this loose step at the bottom of the gate. But it was addressed to Madame Sophie Mounier, which is her name. And so she always kind of thought, it's probably Ben who's blackmailing me because he had called her madam. But she didn't have any proof. She just kind of thought that, especially because they started showing up like as he had moved into the building. So after snooping around the apartment building, Jess goes back to Ben's apartment and just starts snooping around. She goes on his social media pages, like on Instagram, Facebook, all that kind of stuff, and he has completely deleted all of his social media. But then she's thinking, oh, that's so Ben of him. He's kind of like known to kind of just disappear and whatever. How convenient. How convenient. Let me just say that. But anyways, then she goes through his wallet that she finds, and there's this card. It's like a business card to somebody who works at The Guardian, which is like a publication, magazine, newspaper. On the business card, it says, pitch story to him. So you're like, huh. So Jess decides to text this number and ask if this person has seen Ben. And then she notices there's a tear in the silk on the walls. They were like, I'm guessing it was like a silk wallpaper or something, but she notices that there's this tear. So she goes and she's looking and she realizes there is a secret door into like a secret passageway. Dun dun dun. So of course she goes into it, right? So she's in there and she's just kind of like following it around, and I think she hears steps or something because she keeps like following it around. So a lot of times in the book, I kind of can read, not that I'm reading fast, but do you ever, like, when you're reading, you kind of skip over things and you're like, wait a minute, number one, what did I just read? Or two, did I understand that correctly? So then you have to go back and reread it. I should have reread that part because I was like thinking back, I'm like, I don't understand what's happening here, but okay. Anyways, so I think she's just like following the sound of somebody's steps going down. She realizes that from this like secret passageway, she can see into pretty much everybody's apartment, but then she keeps going down, and then she's in this basement area, which is obviously underneath all of the apartments in the apartment building, and it's kind of where there's like extra storage, there's the washing machines, and the light is on a timer, so you switch it on and it's only on for a certain amount of time and then it switches off, and you know, spooky basement vibes. So she's looking around and she sees his Vespa, which I don't know how she knows that this was Ben's Vespa, but she knows that it's Ben's Vespa, so she's like, okay, well, if that's here in the basement, then he's not out frolicking around Paris, which I don't know why she thought that. Like, when I was reading this, I was like, why did you think that he was doing that? But anyways, and even if he wanted to, the tires were slashed. So she's like, okay, something's really going on here. Or maybe, who knows, maybe the tire just like popped, but it looked like it wasn't intentionally done. She's looking around and there's this separate area where there's just like a wine rack with tons of different expensive looking wines. Then she just decides she's gonna grab one because there's so many. She's like, they're not even gonna notice that it's missing, whoever's wine this is. And then out of nowhere, the door slams shut, the lights go off. So Jess is locked in this room. She thinks that somebody has locked her in there. She's screaming for help, screaming for someone to come unlock the door, but she's in the basement. And then out of nowhere, someone comes and opens up the door. And immediately she thinks it's Antoine. And then she realizes, oh wait, that's not Antoine. This guy's got lighter hair. And then he introduces himself and says his name is Nick. Remember when I talked about how sometimes I'll read too fast and I misunderstand something that I've read? This was something I had to go back to because I read it too fast. At first, I thought Antoine and Nick were the same person. Because of this situation, I thought that she was like, oh, that's Antoine, but his hair's lighter than I thought. And then he was like, my name is Nick. So I thought they were the same person. I had to go back and reread that because I misunderstood that. They are two people. It's just at first she thought it was Antoine, and then she realized right away, oh wait, this is a different person. So anyways, they exchange numbers. She remembers that the name Nick is Ben's friend, so she knows like she can hopefully trust Nick. And then she goes back up to the apartment and she gets a text from Theo. Theo is the editor at The Guardian that she had texted and said, hey, I found your number in my brother's wallet. And she had asked him like, hey, have you seen him? He texts her back and tells her, no, I haven't seen Ben, but do you want to meet up and we can talk? So she's like, yep, I'll be there right now. As she's leaving, she runs into the concierge in the courtyard. She tells her, there's nothing for you here. There's so many like instances where like the concierge just pops up like a ghost type person, and it's like, what's the point? So one thing I forgot to tell you is when Ben was texting with Jess the night that somebody came into his apartment, he was actually leaving a voice memo to her. And in the voice memo, you can hear that somebody comes in. You can't tell who it is, but then you can hear Ben actually groan, like he had been hit or something. So she shares this information with Theo, this editor, and they're listening to it on these headphones to like be able to like really clearly hear it. So at least now she's got somebody like on her side. There's nothing that he can really do, but it's confirmed that something has happened to Ben. It's not like he's just like out doing something else, which I don't know why you would think that. It's been like almost a full 24 hours. Why would you think like, oh, he had to run some errands? No, bitch, your brother's gone. What is going on here? On her way back to the apartment, she decides, you know what? Let me just call the police. This is fishy, especially after hearing that voice memo more close, because before she was just listening to it on her phone, and this time with Theo, she could actually listen to it with his headphones. So it was way more clear what had happened. So she calls the police just to let them know what's going on. The police didn't really take it seriously. They were like, so he's not picking up his phone? Like, what do you want from us, basically? Finally, they decided decided, okay, let's make an official report. What's your name? They wanted her name and info and all of that to make a police report. And she just hung up the phone because, again, she didn't want anything to do with the police with her history that we don't know about yet. So she just hangs up the phone and doesn't make a police report. Then she realizes somebody is actually following her as she's walking around. It's a girl. And finally, they kind of meet up, and Jess talks with this girl very briefly, and she tells this girl, like, hey, Ben has disappeared. I'm looking for him, because the girl had said, like, she was looking for Ben as well. And then when Jess told her, I don't know where he is, I'm looking for him too, he has disappeared, this girl just like darts off. She's like, bye, and leaves. She runs. Jess goes after her and loses her, can't find her again. She's just like, what the heck? Who is this girl? What's going on? This is really fishy. So Jess goes back to the apartment. Still, like, it's constantly her being at the apartment, going through Ben's things, looking for stuff, and she comes across this note, and at the top in French it says the little death, which we find out later is a euphemism for orgasm, or we can call it organism, so I don't get demonetized. And then there's a list underneath that, and it says Sophie M knows. Mimi, how does she fit in? Question mark. And then underneath it says the concierge? Question mark. So Jess goes to sleep. This whole situation was so weird. She's sleeping and she hears someone in the apartment. And at first she's like, oh, is it Ben? Why? I don't get why she keeps thinking it's Ben, but whatever. She hears someone literally moving around the apartment. She's very still, and she can see that the cat at the foot of the bed is like alert and looking at somebody. And then this person leaves. So here's my thing. She doesn't do shit while someone's in the apartment, which I guess, sure, like pretend you're asleep or dead or whatever. But after the person leaves, she runs, grabs a frying pan, and then chases whoever in the hallway and doesn't see anybody. What are you trying to do? Like, what are you going to do with this frying pan now after they're gone? So we flash back to 30 hours earlier, and it's back to Ben's perspective just for this little snippet so we get a little bit more inside scoop into what happened to him. Basically, he is crawling in his own blood and he's thinking like, why is this happening? Nick, of course, like this has to be happening because of Nick. And he sees somebody out of the window on the opposite side of the building, and then he's hit again. So we know he's been hit. He's in a pool of blood, and he knows that Nick probably has something to do with it. The tea is hot. Okay, so now it's present day, which is Sunday. So Nick agrees that he will go to the police with Jess because, number one, she doesn't really speak much French at all, so he can help to like explain what's going on to the police, and then hopefully they'll take her a little bit more seriously. Also, she explained that she just didn't want to give her information. She didn't want to say why, but she didn't want to give her information to the police. From her perspective, we're hearing why. Prior to her coming to Paris, she was at work, and apparently her boss is just like this perverted asshole, and he flashed her his ding dong, you know what I'm saying? So this perv, after doing that, goes into the bathroom with a dirty magazine, and he's in there for a minute. So Jess decides, F you, F this place, F all of this. She takes all of the money out of the registers, and then she lodged 2 keys into the door that he was in so that he couldn't get out. I'm sure he eventually figured out a way to get out of the bathroom, but it was like after she was long gone. But that's pretty much why she doesn't want to go to the police. 1, she stole all that money. 2, she locked him in the bathroom so he couldn't get out. So she feels like she's probably going to get like arrested and all that. But yeah, so they go to the police station, and Nick is talking and translating for her to, I think he's like a detective. His name is Blanchett, or like Detective Blanchett. But he is giving off like really bad vibes, just kind of like doesn't like Jess, kind of being a dick. So then we switch over to Sophie's perspective. She's just kind of thinking back to past tense times. So this isn't happening in the moment. Thinking back to a dinner party that happened at their penthouse before Ben's disappearance. She's married to a man. His name is Jacques. She loves him. We kind of learn that he is kind of like a very intimidating character. Icky old perverted man vibes, but also like rich and powerful at the same time. So that just kind of gives you a picture of like the type of man that he is. But anyways, they're having a dinner party for the apartment. Oh, I just drop that right on my boob. But yeah, they're having this dinner party at their penthouse for the whole apartment. Ben and Jacques just get along great, which was kind of surprising because they're kind of like different vibes, but they get along great. Ben had like asked to go to the bathroom or something and they explained where it was. So he goes, but he just starts kind of like wandering off. Forgot to mention, Ben is actually a journalist. So he was kind of starting to like develop a story and he was there trying to get some answers. So he goes and he wanders off, doesn't go to the bathroom, and instead he wanders off into Jacques' study or office. While he's in there, Sophie finds him and she's just like, hey dude, like what are you doing? This ain't the bathroom. Obviously, you know that. And so she's questioning him, like asking, why are you in here? He's like, oh, I got lost, blah, blah, blah. And in the study is this picture on the wall of this like naked young woman. And he realizes that it's Sophie, Jacques' wife, person that's questioning him at the moment. Awkward. And then Antoine shows up at the party and he's with his wife, Dominique. Again, this is before they had that fight outside and she left him with the suitcase. This was like prior, you know, but she shows up and I just picture her as just like that model type, that confident model type. She was wearing this knit dress that was kind of see-through so you could like see her boobies. She goes outside to have a cigarette and she and Ben ended up sharing a cigarette together. And when they came back in, Antoine was just outraged about it, called her an SL ut because of it. He warned Ben to stay away from her, like all this stuff, just like overreacting, causing a scene. So Jacques ended up just like kicking him out of the penthouse. Very weird part of the story, but later on that night, Sophie was in the shower when Jacques was in like another room and she, like you can tell they have like a lonely marriage, but she's in the shower and she was thinking about Dominique and Ben sharing a cigarette and she, in the shower, thinking about Ben and Dominique, whispered to herself, La Petite Mort, or the little death, which again also is a euphemism for orgasm. I mean, listen, whatever gets you off. I mean, you're into people sharing cigarettes, whatever you're into. So all of that was just a flashback that Sophie was thinking about. So now we're switching over to Jess's perspective, present day, and she hears people talking upstairs and she hears Ben's name. So she's eavesdropping. She realizes all of this conversation is happening inside of the penthouse, which is where Jacques and Sophie live. So she is outside eavesdropping and she hears that whoever's inside say she's dangerous. So she knows that they're talking about her now too. And so she's even more suspicious, like what's going on? Why are they talking about that? Especially because Ben is missing. She must have made a noise or something because Sophie opens up the door and tells her to come inside, like quit eavesdropping, just come inside and join the party. Awkward. So inside is Antoine and Mimi, and Jess is just kind of thinking to herself like, this is a weird little grouping of people for a dinner party, but all right, whatever. And she decides, well, let me just break the ice and tell them, hey, I went to the police to find out where Ben is. So she just says like, so I went to the police today. Mimi spills her wine on this gorgeous like white rug that Sophie has, and you know that shit's expensive. And Mimi is just like immediately embarrassed, just runs to the bathroom, gets an upset stomach, and she's just frazzled. Probably because Jess just said she went to the police. Then, out of nowhere, Nick shows up. It's like, okay, I guess we're having like a little apartment party. Nick shows up and Nick is like, hey, let's just go to the rooftop courtyard. So they have like a main floor courtyard on the bottom and then there's a rooftop one. And I'm guessing that this is exclusively for the penthouse. I'm imagining like almost like a rooftop garden type of thing. So Nick goes up there with Jess and they're talking. And I forgot to mention earlier, after he rescued her from the basement, he actually invited her up into his apartment and they were talking about Ben and stuff. That's where they exchanged numbers. But when she was there, she noticed on his desktop, there was like a picture of him and Ben and two other guy friends. And he had mentioned how, I think it was about 10 years prior, they went on this like European adventure where they were traveling from country to country and just kind of like, I don't want to say roughing it, but they were just like either camping or staying in hostels and just traveling around and having a great time partying and whatever. When Jess was in his apartment, she saw a picture from that trip and she was just asking him about it. I forgot to mention that earlier, but it gets brought up right now when they're on the courtyard together talking. And Jess just kind of like starts to have these, not necessarily feelings for Nick, but she's just kind of like infatuated with him. There's something about him that she's just like, ooh, you know? And you can kind of tell that Nick is sort of feeling that way towards Jess as well. So then we switch to Nick's perspective because they start talking about this trip. And on the trip, they went to Amsterdam. Again, this is Nick, Ben, the guy who's missing, and 2 of their other friends. So that trip 10 years ago where they were traveling around, he thinks back to how they were in Amsterdam and the guy friends all wanted to go to, it's basically like a sex show type thing where you can like watch other people do it. So the guys wanted to go. Ben was like, all right, whatever, let's go. But Nick, like last minute, was like, you know what, guys, I don't want to do this. He just really wasn't into it, didn't want to go. So Ben was like, I'll leave with you. The other guys kind of like made fun of them, like, why don't you want to go see this? But I mean, that's a nice friend. Like if someone isn't into something, I like when another friend supports another. So anyways, they go to this like weed cafe and they're just hanging out, talking. And Ben is just kind of like, hey, like, so what was that about? Like, why don't you want to go and do that? To be honest, I don't think that I would want to do that either. Not for the reason that Nick ends up sharing with Ben, but like I'm good. I don't think I need to see 2 other people having sex in person. I'm fine. I'm good. Fun fact, I've never even been to a strip club before. Like, I'm all right. I'm good. Anyways, when Nick and Ben were at this weed cafe and Ben was asking him about like, hey, like what was that all about? Why didn't you want to go? Nick opens up and shares when Nick turned 16 years old, his dad surprised him with a sex worker as a gift to becoming a man. And he was very uncomfortable with it, didn't want to do it. And his dad was basically just like, you will do this sort of thing. So he is just kind of like, just traumatized from that situation. Yeah, he shares this information with Ben and confided in him. After that trip, we kind of like find out that they just like don't talk for 10 years until Ben had come to like live in this apartment building. And then the whole time you're kind of like wondering why they like didn't talk for so long, especially after something like that. I just feel like that's almost something that would bond you, not bond you, but just like, I don't know, being there for a friend and sharing such a personal detail about like a childhood trauma or something. Anyway, that whole scenario about what happened in Amsterdam was something that Nick was thinking about. He didn't share this with Jess. This is just something that's going through his mind as she's trying to ask him about what they did on their trip. While they're up there, they actually like almost kiss, but they don't. So they go inside and Jess goes to the bathroom and she also, like Ben, wandered off into that study. She also sees the naked picture of Sophie on the wall, and she's quickly rummaging through all of the drawers and things, trying to get some information because all of this is just really sketchy. And she comes across some papers, kind of like invoices for really expensive bottles of wine, like 10 grand, 20 grand. The top sheet was missing. So she keeps going through the drawers and she finds a passport at the very back, and it looks like a very young Sophie, but it's a Russian passport. And Sophie has been speaking French and she just presents herself as she is from France. Jess was like, that's kind of weird that this is a Russian passport, because she didn't think that she was Russian. And then on the desk, she sees a picture of Jacques, Sophie, and their kids when they were younger. Their kids are Antoine, Nick, and Mimi. So everybody pretty much that lives in the apartment, they're all family, which I guess was kind of like a big reveal. I didn't think it was that like, whoa. But I guess like because none of them had really said that, and they were like technically just like leaving out that information. Like Nick, when he's talking to her, didn't say that. But yeah, they're all family. So after everybody leaves this dinner party, we are now hearing from Sophie's perspective. She's thinking back to one day when she was in the courtyard and Ben was there and they were just kind of like small talking. She's always had her guard up with him. I don't know, something with him, she just felt like, I don't trust you kind of vibes. But yeah, he started like questioning her and was like, oh, so like, where are you from? I noticed that your consonants are a lot more harsh than the typical French accent. She like was taken off guard because she in her mind was thinking like, I have worked so hard to perfect my accent. Who is he to like question me? Why is he asking these questions? And she was just thinking back to that time in the courtyard when he asked her that. So she snaps back to reality. She's drinking this wine. She must have just like lost her shit and just like ripped off all her clothes. I don't know why that happened. I don't know why she ripped off all her clothes, but she did. She must have just been like really upset. She comes across as a very like well put together, cares about appearances type of person, so you can tell she's kind of losing it. Also, I forgot to mention, when Jess was in the study and saw the papers with like the wine bottles and the price points, that also explained that Jacques and Sophie basically owned this wine company, which explains like all those wines in the basement and stuff. Those were all theirs. And they own like this very like big, luxurious, profitable wine company. So everyone had gone home from that dinner party, you know, and Jess is back in the apartment and she hears like a scratching at the door. She opens it up and it's the concierge trying to get into Ben's apartment with a key. Jess had a knife in her hand and basically like not necessarily charged the woman, but kind of. And then she realizes, oh, like she's just like an old woman, leave her alone, and just like backs off. I don't know why you wouldn't continue the conversation and be like, what were you doing? Why were you trying to come in here? You know what I mean? But she didn't do that. Which, yeah, don't charge somebody with a knife, but like, don't let them come in your apartment unannounced either. But so that happened. Later on, there's a party going on. Camille, who is Mimi's roommate, is throwing a Halloween party. It's Halloween. So this party is taking place actually in the basement. It's all decorated with, you know, Halloween stuff, spider webs and lights and music and all the things. While Mimi is down there, one of Camille's friends recognized her. Her name is Lulu. She's an irrelevant person, so I'm not gonna put a picture up here for her. Lulu remembers Mimi from a night that they all went out with Camille a little while back. Mimi, basically, she kind of reminds me of somebody who is just very shy, very, like she was almost sheltered as a kid. That's like how I think of her, as like she didn't want to disappoint her parents and stuff. So one night she wanted to go out with Camille, and while they're out with their friends, they like offered her some drugs or something, and she was like, no, don't want to, blah, blah, blah. And then finally caved and she had a little bit and she just let loose. She was just partying, dancing on the tabletops, just like having a good time. And while she was there, she saw Ben. She ended up like falling off of the table and he caught her. So they left the bar, went somewhere kind of like a park nearby just to sit and like cool off. Mimi kind of like really started to have feelings for Ben in that moment. And she looked over in the park and she actually saw a couple doing it against the tree, like in the tree bushes. She like leaned in and started kissing Ben, and he ended up pulling back, and he was really nice and sweet, but he was like, I like you too much for that. Like, no. We learned that Mimi basically fell in love with Ben, and she thinks that he loves her too, and she is just so infatuated with him and in love with him, and almost to a unhealthy level just from that little scenario. So we're at the Halloween party, and now we are hearing from Jess's perspective. So Jess decides to crash this Halloween party. She just threw on a sheet and went as a ghost. Fun fact, that's what I did last year for a Halloween party. Yeah, she figured like, okay, let me get some info from these people because these people are probably friends with Mimi, and she just wants to get some answers. So she's walking around this Halloween party and somebody offers her a drink. This guy's name is Victor, and he's talking with Jess. He's like, are you friends with Mimi? He's like, I didn't know that she really had any friends. He basically shares that like he and the rest of Camille's friends kind of think she's just a little crazy. Jess convinces him to ask Camille for the key to the apartment so that they can go to the bathroom. He gets the key and they go upstairs, and Jess starts snooping around while he waits for her. He thinks she's going to the bathroom. Of course she's not. She's snooping around the apartment trying to get some answers. So Jess finds herself in Mimi's bedroom. She's snooping around, and underneath the bed, she finds all of these like paintings of Ben that obviously Mimi has created. But Ben's naked in all of them. And not only are all of the paintings ripped apart, but the eyes are all poked out. And all of this is wrapped up in one of his gray t-shirts hiding underneath her bed. Red flag. So then she hears Victor in the apartment. He's like calling for her, trying to see where she's at. She stands up pretty quickly, and then she just feels kind of like woozy, and she realizes, oh shit, I have been drugged. And then she just passes out. So it's the next morning, and we learn that Mimi actually drugged that drink that was given to Jess. She actually drugged it first and then had Victor give it to her. He had no idea that that was happening, but she wanted Jess to just like stay out of it, stop looking around. So she figured that would be the quickest way to get her to stop. So yeah, it's the next morning and she is downstairs in the basement looking around and she sees Ben's Vespa and she remembers how she slashed his tires. She had like fallen in love with Ben, you know, and she apparently was like stalking him. He would always go and ride around on his Vespa and that wasn't convenient for her because she didn't have one, so she couldn't stalk him. So she slashed his tires, so now he had to walk around town, so then she could also walk around town and stalk him. She also thinks back to, I'm guessing a couple years prior, maybe months, I'm not sure, but she was in college and she had fallen in love with her professor and she also painted naked pictures of her professor and sent them to his wife. The professor and the wife, they ended up like moving and like leaving that college. This kind of gives you an idea of her, how she's working, you know, like how, like what's going on, you know? So now we're switching to Sophie's perspective. She is thinking back probably a few weeks prior and she's thinking about how she was at this restaurant and she ordered a steak, which for her was like, what? Because she was very much like, I eat 3 pieces of lettuce type of gal. So she orders this steak. She's almost like a little embarrassed about it because she had all of these ideas about her image. She notices that Ben's in the same restaurant having drinks. So he comes over and sits down. He says that he would love to interview her sometime about the company. And she's just very short and direct with him. And she's like, I have nothing to do with my husband's wine company, and like wants it to be known, like I have nothing to do with that. You do not want to interview me. Ben was just like, okay, like that's fine. If you ever change your mind, let me know. So then later that night, she had gotten drunk at the restaurant, and then later that night she goes to his apartment and knocks on the door and she confronts him because again, this whole time she's been getting multiple ransom notes. I forgot to mention that. She got the one, but then they just kept coming. So she kept putting her jewelry in these envelopes to give to this blackmailer because it would have been more obvious to her husband that she was like getting money and she didn't want to be questioned about it. But yeah, she's been pretty positive that it was Ben that was sending her these ransom notes. She knocks on his door and she confronts him about it and she's like, listen, like I know you're sending me these notes, you need to stop. And he's all confused, like, what are you talking about? This is not me. And she believes him. She realizes, oh, she was wrong. He's not the one that's blackmailing her. And then she leans in and kisses him, pulls away, and then he comes back even like, and they just start making out. He's like, I've wanted you from the beginning, and then they just do it. Ben and Sophie. I was like, what? So that's probably whose panties were in his bed. Again, all of that is a flashback. And now we're swapping over to Nick's perspective. He's in his apartment. He's thinking back to Amsterdam, thinking about how he had confided in Ben about like what his dad did. So yeah, after he had confided in Ben with this information, he leaned in and kissed Ben. Ben is just getting around. Then they leave and they go to a park and they get it on in the park. Ben and Nick. I was like, I was not expecting this. That is why they didn't talk for 10 years. Ben's just doing Nick, doing Sophie, Mimi's in love with him. Like, what? What's going on? So then he snaps out of thinking about this because now Antoine's at his door. Again, this is the day after Halloween. And he comes in yelling, being like, we need to get rid of Jess. Like, she needs to get out of here. And he also insinuates that he knows that there's something between Nick and Ben. And that makes Nick upset. He kind of like goes after Antoine because of him saying that. He starts to choke him a little bit, but then he lets go. Just the drama. But he explains to Antoine, like, don't worry, police aren't going to get involved. I took care of it. So now you think back when Nick went with Jess to the police to talk about everything, he talked to them all in French. She didn't know what was going on. So he obviously like said something to make them not look into this further because he clearly knows something. Something's going on. Nick knows about something. Antoine knows about something. something has happened. So now we switch to 72 hours earlier. Oh, the swapping around. I hope that this makes sense and isn't too confusing. This is from the perspective of the concierge. She sees Nick and Antoine carrying a body down to the courtyard and sees them burying the body. As she's watching them bury this body, she sees Mimi off in the window watching it happen. So Jess wakes up the next morning after Halloween. All of this again, I feel like a lot of stuff happens, or it seems like it's been so long, but really it's just so many different flashbacks that we're still only, this must be Monday morning now. So Jess wakes up in her apartment after she's been drugged. She gets a text from Theo. So one thing I forgot to mention is when Jess saw Theo, the editor at The Guardian, she also gave him this card that she found in Ben's wallet. It was like a metal card with a design on it and was like, can you like look into this? What is this? Text Jess and says, he found out what that metal card was all about, but you need to meet me today at this time and wear something smart. Whatever that means. So Jess gets ready, she gets dressed, she goes downstairs, she's walking through the courtyard, and then the old lady / the concierge grabs her and drags her into her cabin, and she's like, you need to leave. There's no reason why you need to be here. Ben's gone now and you need to stop. She straight up says to her, like, if you know what's good for you, you'll leave. It's a little much. Also, while they're in there, Jess is looking around at the little cabin and she sees all of these pictures of this beautiful young girl. And she's like, who is this girl? Like, she's so pretty, so random, right? Why are we talking about this daughter when this lady's literally threatening you? But whatever. She's like, oh, she's so beautiful. And the concierge is telling her like, oh, that was my daughter. That's the reason why I'm in Paris. She moved here and now I can't find her anymore. This was also something that she had told Ben about as well. Oh, one more thing. I totally forgot to say this, but remember how we thought that Nick and Jess had like a little connection? They had a little thing. When Nick was thinking back to how he had kissed Ben in Amsterdam with Jess, the reason why they almost had a thing was because he saw Ben in her, like because they're related. What a twist. Anyway, moving on. So all that's happening right now with Jess and the concierge. At the same time, Sophie's up in her apartment / the penthouse, and Mimi comes and knocks on the door. She runs in and she's just all like frazzled and worried. Sophie's like, we'll figure something out. Like, I'll protect you. I'll take care of you. While she's holding her, she's thinking about how when she married Jacques, she unfortunately wasn't able to get pregnant. And one day, he just comes home with a baby who was only a few days or a few weeks old. And he said that the mom for this baby had died and they had gone and gotten like a birth certificate made to look like it was Sophie's kid. So Mimi came from someone else. Nick and Antoine are brothers. Mimi her whole life has thought that Sophie and Jacques are her biological parents. So as Sophie's holding Mimi, she's thinking about like how she came to like be in her life and she'll like protect her. So Jess finally leaves and gets away from the concierge and she goes and meets Theo. And when they get there, he pulls out the metal card. And the whole time Jess is like, where are we? What are we doing? He's like, there's no time for me to explain. I'm just gonna show you. Just zip it, let's go. The person at the door lets them in and takes their phones because no phones are allowed. So they have to give this guy at the door their phones, and then he hands them a mask to like cover up their face, which, what the fuck is this place? So they go in, it's kind of like a auditorium room type of place. The server comes up and starts pouring the wine, and Jess realizes that the brand of the wine is Meunier, the last name of the family that lives in this apartment. So she whispers into Theo's ear and says that. And then he whispers back to her and says he submitted a request to receive the tax documents for the place that they were at, and the owners of that place was the Meuniers. So Jess is looking around and she actually sees like the body, like the back of someone's body, and she's like, that person's familiar. I don't know. You know how like you can tell someone's mannerisms and stuff? So she can tell that she recognizes this person but doesn't know who it is, obviously, because this person has a mask on. So the curtains open up and it's basically like a burlesque type show. During the show, there's a girl on stage and Jess recognizes her. It's the girl that was following her and then ran away when Jess said that Ben disappeared. Jess recognizes this girl on stage. The girl recognizes recognizes Jess. They kind of lock eyes and there's like this, whoop. So then after the show, Jess and Theo go in this secret door because they want to go find this girl. So they're going down there and then they get caught by the guy that was like running the door, and he just grabbed their arms and made them leave because they couldn't go down there. And then while they're outside, thankfully, this girl comes out there and starts talking to them, and they decide they need to go somewhere more private. So they go to like a little cafe restaurant sort of nearby, but also far enough away from the club. So this girl basically starts to explain that it is a like sex work type of thing, that all of the girls that work at this place, they can't leave. Like basically their passports get taken. The whole show is kind of like you like what you see type of thing, and then these rich powerful men will go and they'll order a younger vintage wine, and that means like a younger girl. If they order like a special vintage wine, it means extras, you know what I mean? But she kind of explains that like some of the girls actually don't mind it because like the guys give them gifts. Some of them kind of treat them like girlfriends type of thing, but some of them get abused. And then she explains this story. It was kind of like a rumor that she heard. There was this girl like almost 20 years ago that was working there. She ended up getting pregnant. They wouldn't let her go to the hospital to have the baby, so she ends up having the baby at the club. She ended up dying in labor. And then she also explains one of the girls that worked there ended up marrying the owner. So Sophie used to work there. It makes sense that Jacques had her passport in his desk in the office. Little clues and loose ends are starting to tie up through this conversation with her. But basically this girl said like she had met Ben and he had promised that he was going to help get her out and also protect her when she got out. Meanwhile, while all of this is happening at the restaurant, Sophie, Mimi, Nick, and Antoine, they're having like a little meeting in the penthouse about what's going on, and the concierge is outside listening, and she's thinking back to when she told Ben all of this stuff about her daughter and how her daughter had come to Paris, her daughter ended up pregnant, and how she told her mom about it, the concierge, and she got some money together, said she was going to help support her and help raise this baby. And when she got to Paris, she couldn't find her. There's like no trace of her. So she went to the club where she knew she worked, and the ladies there basically said that she had died in labor. So the concierge found out where the grandbaby was at. Turns out that the daughter of the girl that had died in labor is actually Mimi. So that's why the concierge ended up going and working for the family so she could still watch Mimi grow up. Isn't that sad? I would be pressing some charges. So yeah, the family's having a meeting and Mimi ends up just like leaving in a tizzy, and she's just thinking back to how, again, like how she was like so in love with Ben. She had went and got like some special lingerie and like went to his apartment. She was like going through his stuff in the apartment, in the bathroom, saw some of his hair like on the sink and started eating it. What the fuck? This girl is just like a walking red flag. While she was in there, she saw Ben's laptop and somehow figured out the password to his laptop, saw this document, and it was basically all of the information that he had on the family and on the wine company and the club, and all this information on Mimi and how she's not actually their biological daughter. And this was the first time that Mimi had found out this information. So she freaked out. Meanwhile, while she's looking through the laptop, she hears someone at the door, and it's Ben. So she runs and hides in the closet because she can't believe like what she had just read, and also just the fact that like he was even there like investigating it anyways. Like for some reason she thought that like he was in love with her too. Can you imagine if he really did come in and she was in there like naked in his apartment? But yeah, so she's in there hiding and he's about to get in the shower when there's a knock at the door. This scenario is the same day when Sophie had come to the door and they just started having sex in his apartment. So meanwhile, when that happened, Mimi's hiding in the closet and witnessed it. Now she's also like crazy in love with him, and like she's like eating his hair and stuff. Afterwards, they hop in the shower and she makes a run for it. And she runs back to her apartment, to the paintings that she had of Ben and poked out all the eyes and tore them up and put them underneath her bed. So that explains why that was there. So meanwhile, Jess and Theo are talking to this girl from the club. After she leaves, they're outside of the restaurant, and he out loud is like talking to himself, and he's just like, wow, so like everything that Ben did say was true. And Jess realizes this guy is just going to take Ben's story. He doesn't actually care about Ben. He just wanted Ben's story and was going to use it to get all the praise. So she gets really pissed off, tells Theo, like, you're just an ass. You know, you don't really care about my brother, blah, blah, blah. So she, like, runs away from him. As she's running away, she, like, comes across this street where there's, like, a bunch of protesters and police, and they, like, throw this tear gas. I feel like this was so random and so like irrelevant to the story, but yeah, she's like in the street like with tear gas in her eyes, and Theo caught up to her and he's like picking her up and helping her. They go into a nearby restaurant just to get away from the tear gas. Again, so random that even happened. They get into this restaurant and he's like, let's go wash our eyes out in the bathroom. So they're in there and he's like, listen, I can understand how that seems, and yes, I was thinking about myself and how I want this story, but I like care about you and I want to help you because I know you really want to find your brother, and I'm sorry that I was being selfish. Jess sees that he's like being genuine. She just leans in, starts kissing him, and they just do it right there in the bathroom on the sink. Lots of people hooking up with everybody. So anyways, then they leave and they're at the train station, and Theo is just like, you shouldn't go back to those apartments. It's not safe, especially after all that we know about this club. And like, obviously there's something going on with them and Ben. They don't know what, but clearly Ben had like figured out everything that they know right now and was trying to expose them, and they found out about it, and something bad happened there. So he's like, don't go back to that apartment. As they're talking, then she sees that one detective guy, Blanchett, he's coming, and some cops are coming, and they just like tackle Theo. They arrest him. She realizes that Blanchett was like the figure body that she recognized at the club. So it's all connected. The police are corrupt. They're involved with this whole like sex trafficking thing. So she runs, and Theo's even yelling at her to get on the train and go. So she scoots, she gets out of there. I forgot to mention at the meeting with Sophie, Mimi, Antoine, and Nick, I forgot to mention that Antoine had like gotten shitty with her, and he had like basically called her a whore. He must have known that she had come from that club, and Sophie ended up like slapping him across the face in front of Nick and Mimi. After they left, Sophie's in the bathroom kind of like getting her shit together. When she comes out, she realizes that Antoine is still in her apartment. She's just like, what are you doing here? He kind of just has this like evil smirk on his face, and he admits that he's the one that has actually been blackmailing her. He starts threatening her and says he wants the money right now in person because she was late. And I think it just like really took her off guard, because she had thought originally that it was Ben, you know, and then realized it wasn't. So I don't think she had a clue that it was actually Antoine that was blackmailing her. But yeah, he basically says like he knows that she used to work at the club. He also thinks that his dad is a pretty bad guy, and he thinks that his dad actually poisoned his biological mom because she was like really sick, and the physicians didn't know why she kept getting sicker and sicker, and they couldn't figure it out. He's blackmailing her because one day when she was leaving Ben's apartment, Antoine was in the hallway and saw her with smeared lipstick and pointed it out to her. So they both like know that she was like cheating on Jacques with Ben and was going to use that against her. And finally she was just like, fine, tell him about it. What are you going to do? Text him? Tell him then. Text him right now. See what happens. And she also says she's not giving him any more money. So Jess decides to go back to the apartment. I guess like where else was she going to go? Because like Theo just got arrested. She doesn't have any money, and yeah. So she gets back to the apartment, and when she goes in, she realizes that the concierge is at the bottom of the stairs, just like laying there, and she's not dead, but she's just laying there. Jess realizes she doesn't have her phone. She can't call the police because she left it at the club when they took it when she went in. So she doesn't have her phone, and she goes to run to the street to get help, and the gate is locked for whatever reason. I don't understand how that happened when she had like just walked in. So that was a little confusing to me, unless somebody like had locked it behind her, but just weird. But yeah, then Nick is at the top of the stairs and he's like, we need to talk. And she's like, no, not after what you did to Ben. He's like, I didn't do that to Ben. That wasn't me. And she's like, I can't believe you would do that to your best friend. He's like, no, he's not my best friend. Like, what? I thought you guys were. So then we hear from Nick's perspective in that moment and how he thinks back to how 3 days prior, after like Mimi was like in the closet and saw what was on the laptop and then saw Ben and Sophie getting it on, she after that left and went to Nick and said, this is what I just found on the laptop. And it says all of this about like Sophie and our dad not being my dad. And in that moment, Nick realized the only reason that Ben had even reached out to him was for a story. So he was pissed because he felt like, also I think Nick was like kind of in love with Ben a little bit. They had shared that kiss and hadn't talked for 10 years. And then out of nowhere, Ben had reached out to him. So he thought that Ben was just like trying to like reach out to a friend and hang out and like, or potentially rekindle some kind of romance. But really Ben was trying to write this story. So Nick kind of felt betrayed. And so then he was angry. So yeah, Nick is thinking back to this while he's at the top of the stairs. And as he's standing there, Antoine comes out and he says, hi, little girl. I can't. Do you know that clip of the guy that says, hello, baby girl?
Hi, baby girl.
That's what I think of when I read this line. But yeah, this is where like 500 things happen at once and everything just gets a little crazy. So she is at the bottom of the stairs. Both of these guys are like at the top of the stairs. Also, like, I don't understand why the concierge was just like at the bottom of the stairs. It's explained that like Antoine had like gotten out of control and must have like pushed her or something, but they don't explain why, and I don't understand. So that's weird. Jess runs over to the elevator and hops on it, and they're trying to like chase her. They use the stairs instead. She somehow gets to Ben's apartment before they do, which I'm trying to think of the logistics of everything. I just feel like they would get there at the same time, but whatever. So she gets inside and she closes the door and locks it. She's looking around the apartment trying to find a way out, and she's thinking like, oh, I'll use that secret passageway, but it was blocked by the sofa, so she couldn't get to it quick enough. All of a sudden the door is opening up because Nick has a key. So when Nick enters the apartment, he's like pleading with her, like, I had nothing to do with it, I promise, listen to me, blah, blah, blah. So Jess runs and grabs a knife and goes to run out, but Antoine was in the hallway. So she lunges at him and pushes him down the stairs, and she runs over to this separate wooden staircase. So I forgot to mention that this staircase has been there the whole time, and she saw Sophie going up to it one time, but then never revisited it ever. Like, bitch, you've been here for 3 days and you knew that was there. Why didn't you ever attempt to go check up there and see what's up there, see what it's all about? Just strange. Like, doesn't make any sense. But yeah, so she runs up there, and sure as shit, there lays Ben on a mattress with blood, and she's freaking out. She's like, he's dead, you killed him, blah, blah, blah. And I was like shocked, because this whole time I thought Ben was alive somewhere, just captured. But when she's like, oh, he's dead, like, you killed him, I was surprised, because I was like, I thought he was alive somewhere. So she's there holding his hand, all upset because he's dead, and then his hand twitches and his eyes open up and he's actually alive. Apparently that is like the big reveal of this book. I thought he was alive the whole time. I didn't think he was dead. If you don't tell me he's dead from the very beginning, I don't think he's dead then, you know? Like, I know there was talks about burying a body and stuff, but that doesn't mean anything to me. That doesn't mean that he's like for sure dead. I've seen way too many horror movies and murder mystery movies. Unless there's like 1000% evidence that they're dead, I don't think they're dead. So the biggest reveal of the book to me was Ben and Nick, and Ben and Sophie, but I don't know, that's just me. So yeah, she's screaming about it, and then Sophie and Nick come up into this area. This is kind of like the maid's quarters, by the way. It's basically an attic, but it's where maids would have lived. Sophie looks pissed that she had found him, and Nick looks like he has seen a ghost, because he was like, I buried that man. Like, what's going on here? So here is what happened? Sophie explains it all. After Mimi went to Nick and told him everything that she had found on his computer, and he was all upset because he realized like that's the main reason that Ben came to Paris in the first place, was to write this article and kind of use him to get to the root of like what his family's business is all about and stuff. He ended up calling his dad and telling him, especially because he was jealous that his dad really liked Ben. He got the vibe that his dad liked Ben more than himself and even more than Antoine as well. In his mind, he kind of almost wanted to get back at Ben for that too. So he went and told his dad that, hey, like your favorite Ben is writing this article about you. Jacques comes back into town because he's always traveling, which I almost wonder now that I'm thinking about it. I wonder if he runs multiple sex trafficking clubs and that's why he travels. I don't know. But yeah, so he comes back into town and he's the person that comes to Ben's door when Ben is leaving Jess that voice message. When Ben opens up the door, Jacques at the door, and he's got a Magnum bottle of wine and he just starts beating Ben over the head with it. And Mimi is actually seeing all of this through her window, and she sees Ben yelling help and sees that her dad is just like beating the shit out of him. And even though she was upset that he was like writing that article, and she was obviously upset that Ben had slept with her mom, Sophie still was like in love with him. She grabs her art palette knife and she runs downstairs to go and save him. And when she gets in the apartment, she just stabs her dad. She kills him, and she's laying there in the blood of both her dad and Ben. And Sophie and the concierge, they must have heard it all going on, and they come up and see her with the weapon, with Jacques laying there and Ben laying there. So to protect her, Sophie didn't want anybody to know that she had done that, and the concierge also probably didn't either because that's technically her granddaughter. So they take Mimi into the bathroom, rinse her off and calm her down. She almost like went into shock right away and kind of like forgot what she even did because everything happened so fast. And two, I just truly think she was like in shock. Sophie takes down all the curtains from the wall and wraps Jacques in the curtain. She and the concierge bring Ben upstairs into like the maids area. So then Sophie gets Nick and Antoine to take Jacques' body out to the courtyard when they thought they were taking Ben out there. So they thought that their dad had come into town and killed Ben and then left. They didn't know the part about Mimi stabbing their dad. So this whole time, Sophie has been tending to Ben up in the attic and making sure he stays alive, I guess. Nick didn't know that he was up there. Antoine didn't know that he was up there. And I don't think Mimi knew either. I don't think Mimi even knew what happened. Mimi actually thought that she killed Ben this whole time, but she had just like rejected what had actually happened and like completely forgot about it and was kind of trying to like put the puzzle pieces together. So yeah, Sophie explains to Jess and to Nick what happened. Jess basically convinces her like, listen, I'm not gonna tattle on your daughter, but he needs to go to the hospital. He's been here with like broken arms and he's all bruised up because he got beaten with that Magnum wine bottle. So she's like, you need to let me bring him to the hospital. So a week later at the hospital, Jess and Ben are sitting there talking about what to do next, like what's the next game plan, and Theo shows up. Jess basically says that she has an idea. So I don't know how much time later it is, but it's sometime later. I don't know if it's weeks or months, but Sophie gets a letter in the mail, and it's obviously from Jess and Ben. And this letter basically says that the article that Ben wrote will be out in 2 weeks, and Sophie can decide how the article should be, not how it should be written, but basically she has two choices. Either she can just not be a part of it at all, or the article can position her at the forefront, make her almost like a starring role. They said that both Mimi and Nick won't be mentioned in the article. Antoine was very much so involved. Also, they said that she should sell the apartment building because it's worth a lot of money. And when the article comes out, obviously the business is going to be squashed, and that she should give a certain amount of money to each of the women that work at the club. And then they can all figure themselves out with that money. And as Sophie's reading this, she's thinking about how Mimi has already moved out to the south of France, and Nick has also moved out as well. And then 2 weeks later, when the article comes out, the article basically states that Jacques is just like missing. He has run away when we know that he's actually dead in the courtyard. And Antoine ends up taking his own life because he didn't want to get arrested. And then the book ends with Jess deciding she wants to do some traveling. She feels a little bit more free now, and she got a little bit of money from everything as like a finder's fee. So the money that Sophie was giving to the women, she also gave some to Jess. But yeah, she decided she wanted to go travel through Europe, feel a little bit more free, not feel like she was running from something for once. And Ben decided to stay back in France as an established journalist. They don't say what Theo ends up doing. He's kind of just like irrelevant now, I guess. I kind of wished that Theo and Jess kind of stayed in touch or something along those lines, but we don't know anything that happens with Theo. But while Jess is at the train station getting ready to go on her excursions, her extravaganza, she sees Sophie, but she's just described as someone with her silk Hermes scarves and her dog at the train station, and it looks like she's also set out to go to the south of France. And Jess looks away, gives her her privacy, and thinks we're all entitled to a chance at a new life. And that's the end of the book. And that completes everything. What did you guys think? When I got done reading this book, I personally gave it 5 stars, but as I'm sitting here telling you the story over again, I think I'm gonna have to go with 4. Just for some of the unexplained details, like the concierge at the bottom of the stairs, like what were you doing there? Like how did that happen? It made no sense. And then the little details about the concierge being like a little spooky, like they kept describing her as an old woman that just like randomly popped up here and there, and it was like, why? What was the point in that? I think that was just to give it an eerie feel. And so for that, I feel like it gave it 1 less star than I would think. But overall, I really enjoyed this story. I feel like I kept guessing. There were so many not twists and turns, but just things that were revealed that I just did not see coming, like Ben and Sophie getting together, Ben and Nick getting together, even just this whole sex work club. I did not see that coming. And the whole time I thought that the concierge was going to be the murderer because she was such an irrelevant character. I get how the author wrapped her into this, so it makes sense, but because she was so irrelevant for so long, I was like, she's got to be the reason why he's dead, because why else would she be in this book? Yeah, I definitely didn't guess the ending. I don't know how you could. There's just so many different twists and turns, I guess. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the writing style. I have also read The Guest List from Lucy Foley, and I really liked that story as well, but that one I easily guessed the ending. It was like halfway through the book and I knew who was the murderer. So with this one, I was constantly guessing and I had no idea. At the end of every chapter, it's left with a cliffhanger. I love that because then I am so excited to get back to that, and each chapter for the most part switches whose perspective you are hearing from. If it leaves you at a cliffhanger, you need to hurry up and get through the next chapter so you can get back to that person, because you're going to a different person on the next chapter. Let me know your thoughts down below on what you thought about this book. Let me know what you think about the different reveals throughout the book. Like, what shocked you the most? What were you let down with the most? Let me know down below. What do you think? And also let me know what book I should do a books and makeup looks video on next. Yeah, that's everything for this video. Thanks for hanging out. Please subscribe so you don't miss my next books and makeup looks video, and I will see you soon. Bye.